I was trying to explain this concept to my partner this morning, just this messy, abstract cloud of an idea I had. And right in the middle of the sentence, I stopped, hit a wall.
Ah,
I couldn't find the noun. I had the shape of the sentence. I knew exactly where I was going. But the slot where the word spreadsheet was supposed to go was just
that
empty.
dreaded tip of the tongue phenomenon. Yeah, we've all been there.
It's the worst. But it made me realize something we totally take for granted. The absolute miracle of what we're doing right now. We're taking these electrical signals in our brains, turning them into air pressure waves, and somehow I am planting a very specific idea right into your head.
Yeah.
And we do this while, driving, while cooking. It's effortless.
But
Until it's not.
Until the machinery jams. And honestly, that's usually the only time we even notice machinery is there.
Yeah.
But you're right, that machinery is an incredibly sophisticated, invisible architecture working nonstop behind the scenes.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking today on this deep dive. We are prying open the black box of grammatical encoding, basically. How does a thought actually become a sentence?
It's a fascinating area. We're going to be navigating through a really comprehensive chapter. It's called Syntax and Production, the Architecture of Grammatical Encoding by Fernanda Ferreira and Polly Engelhardt.
And our mission is pretty simple. Even if the science isn't, we want to slow down that split-second process. We want to understand, how we choose words, why we put them in that order, and the big one. Do we actually plan what we're about to say? Or are we just laying down track in front of a moving train?
And spoiler alert, we're going to find out that speaking is actually quite expensive.
Expensive? How so?
Cognitively expensive. It costs your brain a lot of fuel to get those words out in the right order.
Okay, let's get into this.
Yeah.
If we're talking about how we build sentences, we have to start with the blueprint, right?
Yeah.
Syntax.
Right.
Now, most of us haven't heard that word since we were, diagramming sentences in middle school.
Exactly. And simply put, syntax is just the set of rules for combining words. It's the skeleton of your sentence.
Right.
So in English, we generally follow a subject-verb-object pattern. You say, the boy ate the apple.
You don't say the apple the boy ate.
Right, unless you're Yoda.
But in a language like Japanese, the rules are totally different. The verb comes last.
Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting. Even within those, rigid rules of a language, the speaker has a surprising amount of freedom. The source material uses a great example with a cat and a dog.
Oh, right. I loved this part. So let's say the message in my head is about my cat scaring the neighbor's dog. I could say, my cat terrifies the dog.
Simple, active, yep.
But I could also say, the dog is terrified of my cat. Or even, it's my cat that terrifies the dog.
Precisely. Same facts, totally different structures.
So why do I pick one over the other? Is it just random? Do I just flip a coin in my brain?
The research says no. The structure you choose depends really heavily on what is currently active or accessible in your mind. So if you were just talking about the dog, the concept of dog is already lit up in your neural network. So you're more likely to grab that first and make it the subject. The dog is terrified.
So we build the house around the furniture we already have out.
That's a really good way to put it. Now, the source talks about the dominant theory for how this building process happens. It's often called the Bach-level model.
Okay.
And it suggests we don't just speak. We build speech in two very specific stages.
2 stages. Why not just grab the word and say it?
Because grabbing the word and saying the word are actually 2 different neurological events.
Yeah.
Stage 1 is called functional processing. This is where you grab the concept, what linguists call a lemma.
A lemma. Is that like the entry in a dictionary?
Sort of. It's the abstract entry. It has the meaning, and it has the grammatical tag that says, hey, this is a noun. But, and this is the key part, it doesn't have the sound yet.
Wait, what?
You want the concept of cat, and cat is the subject, but your brain hasn't actually loaded the sounds K-A-T.
That sounds really counterintuitive. How can I know the word but not the sound?
Well, have you ever had that feeling where you know a word, it starts with a B, it means a large body of water, but you just can't say it?
Oh, all the time. And I'm standing there snapping my fingers going, it's the thing with the boats.
Exactly. You have the lemma, the concept, but you failed to move to stage 2, positional processing. That's where we finally attach the phonology, the sounds, and put them in a line.
Okay, so meaning first, then sound. But how do we know this isn't just a theory? I mean, we can't see a lemma floating around in an MRI scan.
We can't see it working perfectly, no, but we can see the wreckage when it crashes. Researchers love speech errors for this, specifically something called stranding errors.
This was my favorite part of the reading. The example was someone trying to say, I went to get my truck parked.
Right, but what came out instead?
I went to get my park checked.
Now look at that closely. It sounds funny, but it's so revealing. The root words park and truck swapped places. But did you notice what happened to the ed suffix?
Park trucked. The ed, it stayed at the end. It didn't stick with park when it moved.
Exactly. If you had just swapped the words wholesale, you would have said, I went to get my parked truck. But you didn't. You left the past tense marker, that piece of the grammatical frame, in the correct slot.
Whoa. Okay, let me make sure I'm getting this. The brain had built a frame that looked something like, get my noun verb, and then it dropped the wrong brinks into those holes.
Precisely. The frame, the syntax, and the content, the words, are processed separately. The frame was solid, the content got scrambled.
That is wild. It's like the brain built a scaffold and then accidentally threw the bricks in the wrong holes, but the cement was already poured in the right shape.
That's a perfect analogy. And it gets even deeper when we talk about something called movement.
Movement? You mean like walking around while talking?
No, I mean words moving within a sentence.
Yeah.
In linguistics, the idea is that complex sentences are just variations of simple ones. So if you have, my cat bit the dog, and you want to ask a question, you move the object to the front.
Which dog did my cat bite?
Right. Which dog moves from the object position at the end all the way to the front. Now, in formal linguistics, specifically this thing called government and binding theory, when you move a word like that, it's not a clean break. It leaves behind a trace.
A trace, like a ghost.
Essentially, a silent placeholder. The structure in your brain is actually, which dog did my cat bite trace. The brain still holds that spot at the end as if the word were still there.
Okay, I have to say, I'm a little skeptical. This feels like linguists just drawing lines on a chalkboard. Does the brain actually care about an empty spot? Is there any proof that I'm mentally holding a spot for a word that isn't even there?
We do have proof, and it's in how we pronounce things. This is the famous wanna contraction evidence.
Wanna, as in, I want to.
Yes. In casual English, we squash want to into wanna all the time. I want to go home. Who do you want to invite? We do it constantly. But there are very specific times when your brain refuses to do it.
Give me an example.
Okay, so let's take a sharper example from the text with the word talked. Consider the sentence. John knows who Mary talked to at the party.
Talked to at the party.
Did you hear how you just said to? You pronounced it fully. T-O. You didn't say talk to at the party.
You're right. I did. I said talked to. Why?
Because in the underlying structure, the word who moved from right after the word to. The original spot was Mary talked to who. When who moved to the front, it left a trace, a ghost. And that ghost is standing right next to the word to, acting like a physical barrier. Your brain said, nope, can't reduce this sound. There's a trace occupying the space right next to it.
Honestly, that's mind-blowing. My tongue is respecting a ghost in the sentence structure.
It really shows that syntax isn't just a habit. It's a rigid, real-time computation. And that computation takes energy.
Which brings us to the cost of speaking. Because, again, it feels like I just open my mouth and words flow. If it's so hard, why aren't we just exhausted after a coffee chat?
Well, the data suggests we are struggling, we just hide it well. Studies show that about half of our speaking time is actually silence pauses, hesitations, and it. We are constantly buying time, and we actively avoid difficult structures.
Like the passive voice. The dog was bitten by the cat.
Exactly. Passive voice is notorious. It reverses the natural order of things, and it takes significantly longer for the brain to formulate a passive sentence than an active one.
But hold on. The source brought up that hockey broadcaster study, the Tomlin study, and that seemed to suggest that sometimes passive is actually better.
Better for the listener, maybe? Or better for the flow of attention?
Right, because if Wayne Gretzky has the puck, the camera's on him, the crowd's watching him. If he gets checked, the announcer says Gretzky was checked because Gretzky is the star. If they said the defender checked Gretzky, it forces everyone to mentally switch gears to the defender.
That's true. It maintains what's called the attentional focus.
So in that specific case, wouldn't it be easier for the announcer to use the passive? If his brain is already locked on Gretzky, shouldn't that passive sentence just flow out?
That's the logical assumption, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
If the context fits perfectly, the grammar should be easy.
Right.
But the research says no. And that's the kicker. Even when the context is perfect for a passive sentence, even when it makes the most sense to keep Gretzky as the subject, it still takes the brain longer to formulate it compared to an active sentence.
Really? So even when it's the right tool for the job, it's still heavy to lift?
Exactly. We are paying a syntax tax every single time we use it, regardless of how well it fits the situation.
So we're paying this tax every time we use a complex structure. This makes me wonder about planning. If it's so expensive, do we plan the whole paragraph before we open our mouths? Or are we just, winging it?
This is one of the biggest questions in the field. And the consensus is something called moderate incrementality.
Moderate incrementality. Sounds like a political stance.
It's kind of a compromise strategy. We don't plan the whole speech. That would just take way too much memory. But we don't go word by word either. That would be too choppy and slow. So we plan in chunks, usually one clause at a time.
So I plan the dog ran down the street, and while I'm saying that out loud, my brain is secretly building the next bridge.
Exactly. But there is a competing theory. It's called the race theory, and it's pretty intuitive. The idea is whichever concept in your head wakes up first wins.
So if I see a mailman and a dog, and mailman just pops into my head a millisecond faster,
Then you are sort of forced to make mailman the subject. You'd say the mailman was barked at by the dog. You just build the grammar around whichever word won the race.
that makes a lot of sense. It seems efficient.
It does, but there's a fascinating counterpoint from a language called Odawa. It's an Algonquin language.
And this is the part I found a little tricky. Odawa has free word order, right?
Yes. In English, order is everything.
Yep.
But in Odawa, you can put the subject, verb, and object in almost any order you want, and it still means the same thing.
Okay, so let me follow the logic here. If the race theory is true, and I'm an Odawa speaker, and mailman pops into my head first, I should just be able to say mailman.dog barked. I can put the mailman first, but keep the sentence active and simple.
Exactly. You shouldn't even need the passive voice. You could just front-load the word mailman without changing the grammar at all. It's the easiest possible path.
But do they do that?
They don't. The study showed that when the patient, or the victim, is the main topic, Odawa speakers still choose to use the passive voice structure.
Even though they don't have to.
Even though they have a perfectly good, easier way out, they willingly choose the more complex grammatical frame, the passive voice, because it signals, hey, this sentence is about the victim.
So that proves we aren't just blurting out the first word that wins the race. We're actually selecting a syntactic blueprint first. We pick the frame, and then we fill it.
Right. We're architects, not just reactors. We pick the frame, then we fill it. We aren't slaves to the first word that comes to mind. Although, we can be forced to be more incremental if we have to.
Right, the source mentioned that buzzer experiment.
Yes. If you force people to speak immediately, like literally threaten them with a buzzer, if they don't start talking right away, they'll do it. They'll start speaking before they have a full plan. But the data shows if you give people even a split second of freedom, they prefer to wait. They want a plan.
We want to know where we're going, but sometimes we get stuck. And this brings us to those little words we sprinkle in. Specifically, the word that.
The optional complementizer. Mary knows that her cat is scary versus Mary knows her cat is scary. Both are correct. Why choose one?
I always just thought it was a style thing, or maybe being more formal.
It can be, but the signaling hypothesis suggests it's actually a stall tactic. The research shows we are more likely to include the word that when we're having trouble retrieving the next word.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Mary knows that. Brain searching for the word cat. Her cat is scary.
It's a conscious or maybe subconscious signal to yourself and the listener. Hold on, complex stuff coming up. It buys the system time to process the next chunk without technically pausing.
It's like a verbal buffer. Wow. Now, speaking of how we describe things, there was this part about egocentric speakers that really made me laugh because I do this.
The red hat phenomenon.
Yes. So if there is a picture of a single hat on a table and I ask you to describe it, you could just say, the hat. That's all the listener needs. But people don't do that.
No, they say the red hat or the hat with the feather, even when there's no other hat to confuse it with.
Why do we waste energy describing things that don't need describing?
Because we're not always efficient communicators, or Grecian, as the text puts it, we're egocentric. The redness of the hat is salient to us. It stands out to our eyes, so it activates in our brain, and it just rushes into the speech plan before we can edit it out. We describe what we see, not necessarily just what you need to hear.
So we overshare because our brains are just too excited about the details.
In a way, it actually takes extra cognitive effort to inhibit that information. It's easier for the brain to just say, the red hat, than to stop, realize the listener doesn't need the color, delete red, and just say the hat.
Laziness disguised as detail. I love it.
It's biological efficiency. And this ties directly into the actual sound of our speech, the prosody.
Right, the rhythm and melody. I usually think of that as the music of speech, but the text makes it seem more like the exhaust fumes of the engine.
That's a brilliant way to put it. We tend to think we pause for effect, but really, syntax dictates the rhythm. We pause at clause boundaries. Why? Because that's where we're loading the next plan.
So when I pause after a long sentence, it's not me being dramatic, it's my brain furiously building the next scaffold.
Exactly. You finish one clause, you pause to build the syntax tree for the next one, and then you fire it off. The rhythm of our speech is literally the sound of our brains loading data in real time.
We've covered a lot of ground here. We've gone from abstract lemmas to ghost words to the high cost of the passive voice. And it all seems to point to one thing: efficiency.
Absolute biological efficiency.
It really challenges the idea of style, doesn't it? I mean, I like to think I have a specific way of speaking, a cadence of vocabulary, choices that make me, me. But after this, I have to ask, is my speaking style really me, or is it just the path of least resistance through my particular neural network?
That is the question. If our syntactic choices are largely driven by what's easiest for our brains to access first, how much of our personality is actually just resource management?
Something to think about the next time you find yourself stumbling over a sentence. You're not inarticulate, you're just buffering.
Exactly.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.